to another insightful and exciting episode of Me and My Health Up. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today we have a very special guest for you, and it's Tamar Samuels. Tamar Samuels is a registered nutritionist and dietitian in the United States. She is based in San Francisco, and she runs a company called Culina Health, and it's all about personalizing nutrition and diet to the individual's needs and goals. We have a fantastic discussion around disordered eating. What is disordered eating, how it manifests, and what you can do about it. We discuss the behavioral science behind why we eat what we eat and why it can drive obsessions, unhealthy obsessions, and what you can do to get over it. So without much further ado, I'd love to welcome you into the discussion I'm having with Tamar Samuels. Welcome, Tamar Samuels, on the Me and My Health Up podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Anthony?
Doing fantastic. So great you can join us, and you're joining us from sunny San Francisco. How is it over there?
It's great. I actually just moved here from Miami, Florida, so it's not as sunny as Miami, but definitely enjoying the city. It's a really cool place to live.
So you're doing an adjustment and an adaptation.
Yes, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm used to crazy weather, but coming from Miami is a bit of an adjustment with the weather.
I can imagine. I've never been to Miami, but I've seen plenty of beautiful photos and pictures, and I heard it's a magnificent place to visit. So certainly on my list of places to go. Eventually I'll get there.
Yeah, it's pretty much paradise when it comes to the weather. So
Awesome. Have you been to sunny Sydney?
I have not, but I also hear the weather is quite fabulous.
Absolutely. We're in our summer and it's very vibrant. So yeah, it's really nice. I'm actually quite hot at the moment. It's a hot day in Sydney today. So Tamara, can you please bring the listeners up to speed with a little bit about you, your backstory, and how you've arrived at what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. For those of you who don't know what that is, which I think is actually a lot of people, registered dietitians specialize in nutrition, and we are sort of like the doctor version of all things nutrition related. So we are trained in hospital systems and work hand in hand with the rest of the healthcare team to support people in their nutrition journey. I have been a dietitian for over 10 years, which has been really fun and exciting. This field is evolving very rapidly and always has. So keeps me on my toes. There's always a lot to stay up to date with. So many different trends, for better or for worse. Always debunking lots of myths, if you can imagine. And over the last 4 years, I co-founded an incredible company called Culina Health, in which we provide nutrition care to people across the United States under insurance, under healthcare insurance. So really focusing my efforts on business development, growth, and supporting our clinical team in being the best dietitians there are out there.
Fantastic. And what attracted you into becoming a dietitian? What was the why behind it all?
Yeah, so there were two sort of core moments in my lived experience that brought me to this career. One of them was a lived experience with a chronic GI condition. And as part of that, I did a lot of exploration on how I can manage my GI symptoms. I did probably too much self-diagnosis and self-treatment, specifically using food, for better or for worse. And it started to really impact my quality of life, my relationship with food. And so I really came to this point where I felt like I needed to really learn more about the real science behind nutrition, what works, what doesn't work, as a way for me to manage my GI condition. And then secondary to that, I actually originally wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to work in public health, specifically in the mental health sector, and work with youth. And I didn't realize that there was such a huge gap in access to nutrition knowledge, really for everyone, but certainly for those families in lower income neighborhoods and really stumbled upon nutrition as a career. As part of that, I met a dietitian in my first job ever. And I was like, oh my God, can actually do this as a career? Like, this is so cool. So once I realized that I can make this, thing that I was so passionate about a career, I dove right in, and here I am.
Fantastic. Well, it's so great to have you as a registered dietitian and helping so many Americans improve their health, nutrition, well-being. Just on the nutrition side of things, there's a condition today that's called orthorexia, and it's where we
Mm-hmm.
get obsessed with health and wellness and well-being. And that orthorexia can really create, as you said, in terms of what happened with you around your GI symptoms, was this fixation on food and getting it right, and trying to solve your problem, and other people are trying to solve whatever health problem they have, and it can really drive an unhealthy relationship with food, this orthorexia, or this micro focus on nutrition. So you want to just talk a bit about, I guess this comes under the banner of disordered eating. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love you to talk to how this orthorexia or fixation on health and wellness can create this unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah, we see this, hyper focus on food really affect everyone. It doesn't have any sort of limitations and is more focused on this. We all eat every day, all the time, right? And I think now we have more exposure to nutrition knowledge than we've ever had before, and more stakeholders are talking about nutrition. And we've always dealt with this insidious dialogue around weight and body image and dieting, and so this messaging has really permeated every facet of our social experience, from conversations at the dinner table to the latest documentary on how biohack our way to longevity. There's so much dialogue around this, and it can be incredibly overwhelming for people, because there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of the stakeholders who are talking about nutrition don't have education or background or clinical experience in being able to discuss these topics, aren't trained in interpreting scientific literature. So exposure is not the issue, and that we're all exposed to it. But the problem is that we don't know how to navigate this information, and so I think people really take nutrition advice from a variety of different resources, implement that advice into their everyday lives. Because the cool thing about nutrition is we have the ability to make change in our diet all the time, right? It's a tool that we can act. We can't prescribe ourselves medications unless we're a medical doctor, but we can prescribe ourselves diet or nutrition intervention, something that we have control over. And so that can be problematic in the sense that if we're given the wrong information or don't know how to navigate it, then we're implementing interventions that can be potentially harmful, at worst, and at best are just a waste of time. And so I think this overexposure to nutrition information, this confusion about nutrition advice, and the ability for us to be able to sort of make changes independently on our nutrition has led to a lot of what we're seeing with disordered eating and this hyper focus on what to eat, how to eat, when to eat. And like I said before, everyone is affected by this. So really important topic. So glad you brought it up.
Yeah, so it's just for the listeners, how would they know that they've got a disordered eating issue? Like, what are some of the signs, symptoms, or behaviors that identify this disordered eating?
Yeah, so the thing that I really go back to fundamentally is quality of life. So if you find that your fixation on food, your thoughts and behaviors around food are impacting your quality of life in a negative way, then get serious about assessing your relationship, thinking about getting help for it, and just identifying it as something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and then like, so if like, I can think of myself, periods where you learn something and you think, oh wow, maybe this will make a difference in my life, and you go away and apply that. Like recently I've been applying like intermittent fasting and chrononutrition, so timing of when I eat and when I'm fasting and things like that, and then changing up my macros. It does really alter your social behaviors too, doesn't it? Like
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, oh, well, I can't eat now because the sun's gone down, and like
Yes, yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Anthony, it's such a good example. I'm glad you used yourself as a as a test subject. But when we think about this, like, okay, how much time is spent doing this? Following these protocols, and the time spent following these protocols, is it taking away from my ability to do other things that bring me joy or be present with my loved ones? And how much time am I spending thinking about this, right? Is this something that is occupying my mind when I'm trying to be present, have engaging conversations at work or with friends or with family? Is this impacting my overall time? So am I able to execute on the things that I need to execute on? And what impact does that have on my ability to act, right? Feel stressed thinking about, are you following this protocol accurately? And is it working? Is it not working? And if those thoughts are persistent and occurring on a regular basis for an extended period of time, then we want to really think whether or not this is the right thing for you. And especially if you have a history of jumping from one of these protocols to another, right? Like, are you thinking about trying keto in the past, or intermittent fasting now? Is there a different protocol that you want to try coming up? Are you thinking about, what can I try next? So I think those are all things you want to think through when you're thinking about your relationship with food and the impact that it's having on your quality of life.
Yeah, really interesting, because I was in the sauna the other day and I was listening to a couple of PTs having a conversation, and they were talking about, all things health and wellness. As you know, PTs are very focused on their health and well-being, and hence why they're doing it as their profession. And they were having a conversation around, like, they pigged out, like they guts themselves the day before or that day that they'd eaten more than what they wanted to, and blew their calorie count out. And then they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, like, the behavior where they think, well, I've got to punish myself now. So tomorrow, that's it. I'm going to fast. Tomorrow I'm doing a water fast. And that is just a really disconnection from food, isn't it? Just seeing it as calories, then having to punish yourself. Because you mentioned that thing of control, like, yes, we have control over it, but we can really abuse that control.
That's right. Yeah. We call this a compensatory behavior, right? So you have this cycle of, going off of your protocol, going off of your plan. You feel guilt and shame, and then you try to make up for that by doing an equally extreme behavior like a water fast, or, over exercising, or, being in a sauna all day long, or, whatever that behavior is. It's a pretty extreme way to sort of counteract something that happens as a daily, occurrence. It's okay to not count calories every single day, but for people who have disordered eating, it's not okay. They have to make up for that. They have to account for it in order for them to comply.
For me, it's like going from one extreme to the other, and just, like this pendulum just swinging all the time. Like like, I was just thinking in terms of what you're sharing before around, like, people get very fixated on what they're eating, but they're missing the bigger picture around like, if you think about the context of when you're eating food, like, it can be really helpful for digestion. So if you're really sitting down and engaging in conversation and loving the environment you're in, but you could be eating a burger, right? But that burger will digest really well because of how you're so relaxed in that environment with people you love, and so you're less likely to suffer GI symptoms. Whereas you could be having like a poke bowl or something like that, and then you're focused on, oh, should I eat this in it because, oh, that's got heaps of calorie, and really start, and then you're thinking, oh, that's going to make me fat, and then you start really stressing yourself out, and then that would impair the digestion, right? It's so like
So we have these two main sort of responses when it comes to stress, right? We have fight or flight, which we're all pretty familiar with, where our body is a threat and we need to leverage all of our internal resources to fight that perception of threat. So even if it is like, a stressful day at the office, if you're in fight or flight, your body really is preparing to run or fight. And so in that process, we are leveraging our glycogen stores. So we're going into a state of insulin resistance, so we can really get all of our blood glucose into our brain, into our muscles. We can think quickly, so we can move quickly. We're really shuttling away from our resources from a reproductive perspective and from a GI perspective, right? Like, who needs to focus on digestion when we're fighting for our lives here? And then we have this rest and digest state, as you alluded to. And so when we are relaxed and calm and not activating that fight or nervous system, then our digestion is better. We're more likely to be happy and calm. And so if we are stressed and feeling anxious and worried perpetually about what we're going to eat, how we're going to eat it, when we're going to eat, we could be activating that fight or flight response, which is going to inherently impair our digestion, right? So really important for us to think about our GI symptoms in the context of stress. The GI tract has its own nervous system. It is so cool. And the GI tract actually produces more serotonin in the brain. And so there's a deep, intimate connection between the brain and the gut. And so if we're experiencing chronic GI symptoms, it's really important for us to think about lifestyle and stress and not just about food as our main intervention.
Yeah, because relating back to your experience when you're suffering these GI disturbances, you can imagine like you going on the internet and then looking up all these things that it could possibly be. Cancer could have been one of the bowel cancer.
Oh yeah,
and then that's going to invoke a fear response, and you're thinking, as you mentioned earlier, like this, we're surrounded by too much information, and that can become overwhelming, and that can induce a lot of fear. And so that wouldn't have been helping your journey in terms of, solving or, getting to the bottom or at least alleviating the symptoms of your GI disturbance.
Yeah, it's so tough because we don't want to hear our healthcare providers that we should stress less, right? Like, duh. Like everybody wants to not be stressed out. So it doesn't feel like an actionable piece of advice. Like, oh, you should stress less. Like, thank you, but how do I do that? Like, can you help me with how expensive food is, or like, managing a household of children, small children? There's a lot of stressors that we have, and a lot of them we can't control. But it really is about having practical tools to be able to manage that stress. So we're not having this physiological response that's impacting not just our digestion, but our blood sugar. As I mentioned, when we activate fight or flight, we become more insulin resistant, and that over time can lead to prediabetes, right? Challenges with regulating blood sugar, particularly those who have a genetic predisposition. In fight or flight, we also increase our blood pressure so we can get all those nutrients to our brain and our muscles. But over time, if we're chronically activating fight or flight, that can lead to hypertension or high blood pressure, right? So there's a huge physiological impact that this response has. If we really take the time to prioritize stress management, then there's quite a lot that we can do for our digestion, our cardiovascular health, our metabolic health, and stress management can be foundational to that. In addition to nutrition, right? So we can activate the stress response if we're in a fasted state for too long, and the body perceives fasting, extended fasting, as we're starving, we need to get fuel, right? So that can actually contribute to anxiety. It can contribute to low mood. So I'm sure we're all familiar with the term hangry. When we have low blood sugar, we haven't eaten in a while, we're feeling grumpy, it's hard to focus, there's temper, we're feeling sad. We know that there's a direct impact on our blood sugar and our mood. And so there's a lot that we can do from a nutrition perspective to really help to stabilize our blood sugar, decrease inflammation, which can help to balance our mood and manage our stress response a little bit better.
And so how do you help these clients that come in stressed? Because I'm just thinking like a recent big stressor in the States has been the re-election of Trump, right? So those the population split there. You've got the pro and then you've got the anti. And I can imagine like with Trump, he knows how to capture publicity, and so he's always on the news. He's always one-line Twitter statements and all this, and that would be invoking a stress response for those that are anti or non-Trump supporters. And I'm thinking, you probably have got an influx of them coming to see you because that could be creating GI disturbances. So how do you So these people that, are really, struggling with digestion or, digestive health and getting these symptoms, how do you help them with this, managing this fight flight response? What are some of the tips and hacks, so called, that you help your clients with?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, identifying, as you said, like the source of stress. And if it's something that you have the ability to manipulate, let's start there, right? If this overexposure to news at like inopportune times throughout the day is triggering you, let's make sure we're not scrolling while we're eating, right? Let's create an environment where we have calm and peace while we need to focus on digestion. So that having boundaries, identifying the source can be really, really helpful. So we work with our patients at Culina Health, really strategizing personal interventions, right? And someone might not think that, having boundaries around when I consume social media is a nutrition intervention, but it is, right? It's part of our lifestyle. Because as we have talked about, if you are scrolling through Twitter or X and getting, heightened messages, political messages while you're eating, that is going to impair digestion, which could impact the rest of your day, right? So maybe you're not effectively digesting your meal, you feel bloated, that discomfort sort of sits with you for the rest of the day, it impacts your energy level, you don't want to eat, but then when you don't eat, you get tired. You see there's this like vicious cycle, this sort of series of events that happen. When we focus on the foundational behavior, okay, maybe I want to stay up to date on the news, but I'm going to designate specific times during the day where I'm consuming the news that I know it's not going to have as much negative impact on my health, right? Like, let's avoid doom scrolling before bed so I can get a good night's sleep, which we also know is really important for digestion. Like, let's avoid doom scrolling while we're on our lunch break or while we're eating breakfast or dinner. So a lot that we can do from a lifestyle perspective to really help mitigate.
And so, I mean, that's an incredible tip. I mean, it sounds so simple, but, people do get into these automated behaviors where they're just doing it, right? They sit down with their food and straight away they're flicking their, through TikTok or whatever, news feed that they, or whatever social media platform they follow, or they're getting notifications also, when they're eating,
Mm-hmm.
they're coming through. And so that distracts them away from their food. And yeah, so, just getting back to, getting fixated on what we're eating and hyper focused, and how do you alter that behavior so it's not so polarizing or not so extreme? What do you do around helping the client break that behavior?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about how food, the different roles that food has in your life outside of just, supporting your health and how much you enjoy those roles, right? We don't just eat in a vacuum, we eat in community environments, we eat in social circumstances, and we can find joy and pleasure in eating. And that can actually be very fulfilling for our lives and contribute quite a lot to our joy and satisfaction, as you said, while we're eating a burger or while we're eating, a rich, calorie dense meal, we can still have quite a lot of joy and life satisfaction from that. So it's really important for us to think outside of this notion that food is just fuel and allow room for food to exist in other parts of your life and just finding a balance there. I think you could lean too heavily on either side of the spectrum where you're completely eliminating certain foods because they're not health promoting, or you are leaning on too heavily to support your, need for joy or comfort. So really finding a balance in which you're supporting your mental health, your social life, while also supporting your health long term.
Yeah, you raised a good point there around the other side of the spectrum, which you mentioned is that emotional eating, where food is for comfort and it's to make us feel better. So how do you orientate, your clients back to sort of that middle line where they got better moderation, better balance, and around that emotional eating side of things?
Yeah, so it's really about intention. The challenge becomes when, as you mentioned earlier, these behaviors are happening sort of automatically. There isn't any thought or intention. You're just doing it because you've always done it, or you're not present and aware that it's happening until like you're halfway through and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened here? So I think it's about bringing a higher level of awareness and intention about what it is that we want to accomplish as part of this meal. For example, like if you're going out with friends, do you want this meal to be, more focused on joy, indulgence? Do you want to be able to sort of have a liberalized eating experience? Or are you going out 4 times this week and just, want to ensure that you're getting your nutrients in, focusing on, having as balanced a plate as possible while eating out? You can go to the same place with the same friends, same family members, and eat the same meal and have two very different intentions and behaviors as it relates to that meal. If you want to have a more liberalized eating experience, maybe you're not thinking about portion size, maybe you're ordering, whatever it is that you want. You might be eating to past the point of feeling full, and so not really honoring your satiety mechanism or your fullness mechanism. But you prepared for that mentally. It was intentional, and afterward, you are not surprised, right? Like, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I did, and I accept whatever consequences come with that, whether it's stomach ache or waking up and just feeling tired. You knew that that was what you wanted to do, and you did it. Whereas on the other hand, if your intention is to wake up, not feel bloated, or honor your satiety and fullness, don't want a stomach ache, you want to be able to enjoy certain foods, but you want to enjoy them in moderation, you can be really intentional about how much you eat, what you choose on the menu, how late you eat, what you eat before you go out. Maybe you want to make sure you have something a little bit more satisfying because you're going to a tapas place and you share and you don't know what to get. So there's a lot of personalization that goes into this decision making, but ultimately it's really about intention. What do you want to get out of this eating experience?
You covered so many great points there. It's that having that awareness, like in terms of preparing yourself and setting yourself up for success, as you said, so creating that awareness that, okay, what's my intention around this, and having a strategy and really working towards that, as opposed to just running from thing to thing, running into this blind, and then not really having that awareness or mindfulness around what you're about to consume. Because I can imagine we evolved with that real intention around food. Like it wasn't so abundant, it was more scarce, and so we really valued it a whole lot more. Whereas today it's all around us, it's available anytime. We can do Uber Eats or whatever we wanted to do. It's just constantly there. And so that appreciation and that strong connection and value around food has really been lost over this evolution of us really commercializing food and making it very abundant. So have you got any thoughts, comments around that?
Yeah. As you said, we evolved in an environment of food scarcity, and now we live in an environment of food abundance. And so there's an argument that we're just misaligned genetically with our current environmental circumstances. And, that is true. We see that. This is why we have an obesity epidemic. It's not personal choice or lack of discipline. There's so many factors that influence our body weight, and a big part of that is overabundance of access to really palatable foods that contain a lot of calories, not a lot of nutrients, don't make us feel full, satisfy our pleasure center, and are easily accessible to us at any time of the night. We don't really have to work for them. We don't have to run or hunt. We can open a package, at 2 a.m. and consume, food. So our environmental circumstances make it really difficult for us to self-regulate our food choices. And that's something that we all face, some more than others from like a genetic perspective, but also from a food environment perspective, living, depending on where you live, depending on what access you have to certain foods. So some of us are more vulnerable than others. But really important for us to leverage our own agency by practicing mindfulness and having, those intentions around eating, particularly as adults, right? There's a whole other dialogue that we can have as it relates to children. But as adults, practicing mindfulness and being intentional about what we want out of our eating experience can be really impactful on our behavior. So it's a huge tool, and it takes a while to cultivate that tool, but it's something that everyone can do, which is really powerful.
Yeah, so ultimately it's aligning your eating or nutrition around your overall health goals. And so it's
Yeah.
that very individualized, as you said, it's, well, what's my intention here? Is my intention to really engage with others over the food? And therefore, I'm just going to share with others, and whatever we're eating, that's what we're eating. But it's all about this connection with others and make that really fulfilling. And or is my attention here? No, I'm really, food's really important to me at the moment. I want to get it right, and so I need to, apply some discipline. And these are the foods I'm not going to, I'm going to abstain from. These are the foods I'm going to eat, and that's all aligned to my health goals. And so that's taking me in the direction that I want to go in. So where I'm going with this is this really comes down to personalization, and this is your
Oh,
area
yeah.
of expertise. And so how can the listeners get this personalization? Because as you alluded to, it depends on genetics, environmental factors, what the person's intention is, and whether you've got a micro fixation or you've got an emotional eating concern. It really depends on the individual. So how can the listeners, viewers best connect with you?
Yeah. So really important to seek help. So working with a registered dietitian is like having a partner in this journey. You don't have to do it alone. Registered dietitians are really here to do that work. That's the work that we do with our patients every day at Culina Health. And so getting help, sometimes people need additional help from a mental health specialist, particularly if we have more advanced disorder eating and eating disorders. We want to make sure we're working with a multidisciplinary team that includes medical, mental health, and a registered dietitian. So depending on your spectrum of disorder eating to eating disorders, you want to make sure you're getting some support. Something that you can do at home in sort of the less advanced disorder eating disorders is really take a audit of your daily intake and your feelings associated with that intake, right? Most people aren't paying attention enough to say, oh, when I eat this huge kale salad, even though it's seemingly healthy, it makes me feel super bloated. And when I feel super bloated at lunch, then I skip my snack. And then by the time I get to dinner, I'm starving and I overeat. And then I feel exhausted and guilt and shame. And I wake up, with a stomach ache and just feeling overall not good, right? You can discover that information on your own by just tracking what you ate and looking for trends in your energy levels and your mood associated with what you ate and when you ate it.
I think comes back to that awareness piece, doesn't it? Really,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what that tool is doing for the person, is just making them more aware of the link between what they're eating and how they're feeling. And if they start to discover, as you said, when I eat these type of foods, I don't feel great. I'm feeling lethargic. I'm a bit sleepy, or my digestion's impaired. Then they've got an association there, and they're thinking, well, maybe that food isn't for me. So it's really
Yeah. Well,
helpful.
Anthony, I will say, really important to think about that in the context of things too, right? So you can get a lot of information from tracking food, mood, symptoms for 3 days, 1 to 3 days, even just one day will give you a lot. So it's not something that you have to do consistently day in and day out every day. Some people do like to track on an ongoing basis because it helps them to maintain that self-awareness. But when you do identify an association, it doesn't mean you need to do complete elimination, right? And I think that's where people tend to get confused. Oh, this just makes me feel that I'm cutting this out. That's sort of like, what we're taught to do from social media. Like, oh, you have skin problems, don't eat gluten. Don't eat dairy, right? And so just eliminate that and just have a life that's gluten-free and dairy-free. And for some people, that is really helpful. But for the majority of people, it's not. And so we have to think about things in context, right? Oh, this kale salad is just really not sitting well with me for lunch. I need to just think about different ways that I can approach this. Maybe I can try having cooked kale. Maybe I can try decreasing my portion. Maybe I could just try having, spinach instead of kale. Maybe I could just have it less frequently. Maybe I'm not going to have beans or legumes in my kale salad because the combination of the two of them just leads to, bloating and abdominal distension. So that's where I think it's so helpful working with a dietitian, because you don't have to go to the extremes of, oh, great, I've identified this source of all my problems. Now I'm just going to cut everything out, right? You can really find a plan that is more personalized and sustainable in the long term, that doesn't eventually lead to disordered eating behaviors.
Fantastic. And so, Tamar, how can the listeners and viewers best connect with you to get that personalized eating plan?
Yeah, so you can find me and our team of registered dietitians at culinahealth.com. We have such a robust team, and we offer nutrition care for a number of different specialties. Even if you are just someone who wants some personalized nutrition advice, you're not managing a health condition, just want someone to talk to about the best plan for you, you can work with a Culina Health dietitian. Or if you're managing a more complex chronic condition, autoimmune disease, food allergies, GI condition, if you're going through your perinatal journey and want some nutrition support as you grow a child. So much you can do with a dietitian. You can schedule and book directly online via our website.
Fantastic. And I'll include those links, listeners, in the show notes. So you can go directly to the show notes and click on the link and connect with Tamar and her wonderful company. And I just wanted to thank you, Tamar, for putting aside the time, sharing your insights. They've been wonderful. We've covered a really broad spectrum of nutrition and micro and macro and behavioral. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthony.
You're welcome. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. Please share it with others that you know that have got GI disturbances or gut issues, or maybe it's behavioral issues around food. This episode can really set them in the right direction that can best help them. So please share it far and wide, and I would really appreciate that. And until next time, continue to health up. Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. Me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, me&my Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast, and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of me&my Health Up.